Section 3.3.1-T. Recently, a random sample of 13 to 18-year-olds was asked, how much do you currently have in savings? The data table or the data in a table represent the responses to the survey. We want to approximate the mean and standard deviation amount of savings. So you can see here is the first column we have savings. So I've created a column called savings here. The next column is the frequency. So for each particular class, we have our frequency. So the first thing we need to do is we need to find the sum of the frequency. So when we total up the entire column, 324 plus 83 plus 67, all the way down to 2, when we add those together, we're going to get the sum of the frequency to be 522. Okay, now we want to be able to find the mean first. So that means we got to look at two different columns. So we're going to add two columns here. The first column is the midpoint, and the next column is the midpoint times the frequency. So we need to find the midpoint. So to find a midpoint, we take the two lower class limits. So the lower class, which we have 0 and then 200, we're going to take 0 plus 200 divided by 2, which gives us 100. So we're going to take that 100, which is the midpoint, and then we're going to multiply it by the frequency of 324 to get the result of 32,400. Okay, next, we're going to take the next lower limit, so 200 and 400. So 200 plus 400 divided by 2 is going to give us 300. So we're going to take the midpoint of 300 and multiply it by the frequency of 83 to get the total of 24,900. Okay, next, we have the lower class limits of 400 and 600, and if we add those together and divide it by 2, it gives us the midpoint of 500. So we're going to take the midpoint of 500 and multiply it by the frequency of 67. So 500 times 67 is going to give us 33,500. Okay, next. The next midpoint is between 600 and 800. So 600 plus 800 divided by 2 is going to give us 700. So therefore, we know the midpoint is 700, and then we're going to multiply it by the frequency of 26, which is going to give us 18,200. Okay, the next midpoint, we're going to take 800 and add 1,000 and divide it by 2 to get 900. So 900 represents the midpoint, and we're going to multiply it by the frequency of 15 to get 13,500. Okay, next. The next lower class limits are 1,000 and 1,200. So 1,000 plus 1,200 divided by 2 is going to give us 1,100 for the midpoint. So we're going to take the midpoint of 1,100 and multiply by its frequency of 5 to get a total of 5,500. Okay, then the last one. Okay, now keep in mind here that the next midpoint or the next class would be from 1,400 to, this is going to be 1,599. So again, using the two lower class limits of 1,200 and 1,400 and dividing it by 2 gives us a midpoint of 1,300. So the midpoint of 1,300 multiplied by its frequency of 2 is going to give us the result of 2,600. Okay, now in order to find the mean, we need to find the sum of this column here. So when we add up all those numbers, meaning if we add up this entire column, 32,400 all the way to 2,600, we're going to get 130,600. So therefore, we can see that the numerator is going to be the total of 130,600. And then we're going to divide that by the total of the frequency, which is 522. So we know it's 522. So now, when we do that, we get the following. We get 250.1915709. And so we're going to round this to the nearest whole number. So therefore, we're going to say that the sample mean, since that's what we're looking for, the sample mean is equal to 250. Okay? So again, we found the sample mean. Okay, now what we want to do is now we need to use this sample mean. So we're going to create 3 new columns. Okay, so the first column, in order to find the standard deviation, we need to put in the sample mean that we found. Okay, so let's go ahead and do that. Well, we found the sample mean to be what value? Well, we found it to be, so the sample mean is 250. So this next column is going to have 250 as the sample mean. Okay, and so now the next column, what we want to do is we're going to take the midpoint and then subtract the sample mean. And once we do that, we're going to take that value over in the last column, we're going to square it, and then multiply by its frequency. So let's take a look. We know that the midpoint is 100, and we're going to subtract the sample mean of 250 to get negative 150. So now in the next column, we're going to take that negative 150 and square it, and then we're going to multiply it by its frequency. And when we do that, we're going to get the total of 7,290,000. Next, we're going to take the next midpoint, which is 300, and then we're going to subtract the sample mean of 250 to get 50. So in the next column, we're going to take that 50 and we're going to square it, and then we're going to multiply it by the frequency of 83 to give us 207,500. Next, we're going to take the next midpoint, which is 500, and then we are going to subtract the sample mean to give us 250. So we're going to take that 250 in the last column and square it, and then we're going to multiply it by the frequency of 67 to give us a total of 4,187,500. Okay, next, we're going to take the midpoint of 700, and then we're going to subtract the sample mean of 250 to give us 450. So we're going to take that 450 and square it, and then we're going to multiply it by its frequency of 26. And when we multiply those together, we get 5,265,000. Okay, next, we have our midpoint of 900. We're going to subtract, again, the sample mean of 250 to get 650. In the last column, we're going to take 650 and then square it, and then multiply by its frequency of 15. When we multiply it by 15, then we're going to get 6,337,500. Okay, next, the next midpoint is 1100, and we're going to subtract the sample mean of 250 to get 850. And then we're going to take this 850 and square it, and then multiply it by its frequency of 5 to get a total of 3,612,500. And then the last one, we have the midpoint of 1,300. Again, we're going to subtract the sample mean of 250 to get 1,050. So now in the last column, we're going to take 1,050 and square it, and then we're going to multiply it by its frequency of 2 to give us 2,205,000. Okay, so now if you notice here, we're looking for the sample standard deviation. So what we want to do is we're going to take the square root of the sum of the last column. So if we take a look here, the sum of the last column is the following. So when we find the sum of this last column, you're going to add up all these numbers to give us the following. Okay, you're going to have 299,105,000. So that's going to be in the numerator. Okay, and then we're going to put the sum of the frequency, which is 522, in a denominator and then subtract 1. So let's take a look at this formula here. So again, in the numerator, we have the 299,105,000, and then dividing it by the frequency of 522 minus 1, and that gives us the following. So when we divide that, the numerator by the denominator of 521 now, because 522 minus 1, and then take the square root of that, we get 236.3550795. And according to this question, they want you to round it to the whole number. So therefore, we're then going to write that the sample standard deviation is going to be approximately 236.